Welcome back for a new tint list, a new price charting tint list. So with that said, this time I chose to look at price chart, try to predict, and look at things from 1 year prior to now, and I specifically chose this time around looking at 10 Super Nintendo games. As always with these lists, there is no specific ranking. This is not a top 10. This is just looking at 10 games from the Super Nintendo. Enjoy the music in the background. Today I chose from Mega Man X. Speaking of, the first game to look at, Mega Man X 1 for the Super Nintendo. First up, as of the end, or looking at late July last year, it was going for around $30.12. This year, at the same time period, it is going for an even $30. So it is literally changed by 12 cents. I think, personally, the game is going to stay, could go one of two ways. Either, though I think it's probably going to stay relatively level and stay the same pretty much. It might possibly go up a little with the holidays coming. But for now, I do think it's going to stay relatively steady. If you here's a brand new copy, and keep in mind these prices are for loose copies, so be much more expensive for complete. New would set you back about $468. Now, next up, we're looking at a Square Enix, or rather Squaresoft classic, Secret of Mana. Last year, at this time, on average, it was going for $54. And same time this year, it's going for just short of $46. So, with that said, it's actually dropped $8 from the previous year. I think going forward for now, I think it's going to stay relatively steady. I don't see it really going up, nor do I see it honestly going down anymore. Though, this might be a good time for buyers if you're at all curious about Secret of Mana. This might be a good time to get it, given the price dropped $8 from previous year. Though you can get it remastered in collections and stuff now for like the Switch and things. I think that's one of the other reasons as to why the price has gone down and why it hasn't like gone through the roof like other past Squaresoft games, which have skyrocketed in price over time. I think Mana, because of actually have imports and stuff in collections now, help keep the price relatively much more steady and even. Elker's factory seal copy is about $600. Next up, we are looking at Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo, aka Final Fantasy IV. Time last year, it was going for an average about $57, which is still not insanely expensive compared to some RPGs on the Super Nintendo. That's not really too bad. Now, this year, on average, right now, it's been going for about $48.60. So you see a pretty decent, again, like Secret of Mana with Final Fantasy IV, definitely also a several dollar drop in price. I think right now it's going to stay relatively steady, much like the others. If you're at all curious, a brand new copy will set you back $980. Next up, we are looking at an all-time classic, one of the best beat-em-ups of all time. If not my #1 favorite beat-em-up of all time. Looking at Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time, which of course is part of the arcade 1-up cabinet I have, which is a great game, a great series of beat-em-ups. On this time, last year it was trending for right around $61. This year, right now, it's going for about $56. So, again, several dollar drop in price. And I think that's because the collection and everything coming out. But because of that newer game, I think it will renew new interest and possibly some people wanting to get an original Super Nintendo cartridge. Because of that, I think it could either stay steady like it is, or possibly go up a little. It's hard to say how it's gonna go. This is a bit trickier one, I think. Beat 'em ups aren't as easy to predict as things like a lot of platformers or RPGs. It's a much more unpredictable genre. Next up, we're looking at an all-time classic. Also, if you're curious, Turtles in Time, a brand new copy will set you back almost $1,800, which is insane. But next up, we're going to look at an all-time classic that was the very first game I ever played with zombies in it. Needless to say, all-time classic. Next up, looking at Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Now, this time last year, it was trending for about $38.50. And this year, it is trending for about $35.50, so it's dropped $3, not nearly as much as others, but the price is relatively affordable, and it has been, for the most part, staying below $40 range, which makes it, I feel, a much more affordable Super Nintendo game to collect. Though keep in mind, now you also have, of course, Limited Run did a special batch of modern, on like Switch and stuff, of Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Great. But the price is very expensive. Actually, you'll be paying more for a copy through third-party sellers and stuff as Zombies Ate My Neighbors more than the actual original. So, if you're at all curious, might be a good time to look at, as it's going for about $35. I'd say it's a pretty good time to look into it. If you also like good challenges. Now, price-wise for a brand new copy is hovering around like $930. Also, I think this game, going forward for now, I think it's going to stay relatively steady. I don't see it really going down or up. Next up, looking at an all-time classic, and this is one that has actually definitely been, over time, going up, though it's actually seeing a several dollar drop. Well, actually, more than several. Almost a $13 drop. Next up, looking at Super Metroid. Obviously, the most probably iconic Metroid game between that and Metroid Prime. But if you like the classic Metroidvania, this is probably the best. Last year, this time, it was going for about $76.50, which is a pretty decent price range, needless to say, at least if you already have the game. Now, right now, it is going for just shy of $64. So, yeah, it's seen about a $12 drop, so this actually... Though, even now, I'm not sure if I would recommend, unless you're a hardcore fan of, like, Metroid games, you might look into it, but otherwise, I don't really recommend paying, like, over $60 for the game no matter what. But, to each their own, it depends how big of a fan you are, or specifically into collecting for the console. But with that said, I think the game is gonna go back up, though, personally. I definitely could see it going back up a few dollars. Or even jump back into the $70 range. I would not be one bit surprised. This is one of the games that's much more of like a roller coaster, price-wise. Now, if you're curious, a new copy of this game will set you back almost $3,800, which is insane. Next up, we're looking at another Squaresoft classic, and that is Final Fantasy III, aka Final Fantasy VI. Of course, with the great Kefka. With that said, this time last year, it was hovering around $81. Right now, it's hovering around $69. So it's seen a pretty decent size price cut, but even then, it's still hovering around $70 range. Still, it does stun me the game was going for like $80. But it is arguably one of the most beloved Final Fantasy games of all time, so I'm not one bit surprised. And Squaresoft games tend to hold their value, very much so. With that said, where do I think? I think the game will probably go back up, personally. I could see it maybe staying steady for a month or two, at least until maybe October, late October, early November, and then see the price shoot up big time for the holiday season, especially since this is probably one of the most sought-after RPGs on the console, and the fact this is one of the sought-after games you can get for under $100. Compared to a little something called Earthbound, which is going for over $300. Speaking of, next though, is The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. And, oh yeah, quickly, new copy of Final Fantasy VI, you're looking at about 1200. But next up, looking at Link to the Past, which is arguably one of the greatest games on the Super Nintendo, and I feel is somewhat underrated, at least in the franchise. Price-wise, last year, the game was going for about $28. Very affordable. This year, right now, it's hovering around $37, actually. So it's actually seen instead a price jump of about $9 from last year. Where do I think it's going forward? I think it's going to slow down, but I still think it's probably going to go up a little more. There definitely, right now, has always been, though, a very hardcore market for Zelda fans. Speaking as one of those big Zelda fans myself. But to me, this is a great game, and if you haven't gotten it, you can get it for like around $30. I consider it more than worth that price. Keep in mind, that's only if you find value in it yourself. That's the key. Whether you're a hardcore Zelda fan or a hardcore, in general, Nintendo fan. Or SNES fan. Just depends. You can also get digital as well, keep in mind, on things like the virtual eShop right now for another, like, 2 weeks. Next up, also about 1100 new for the game. Next up, second to last, we are looking at, of course, probably one of the most beloved and sought after Square games of all time. We are looking at, of course, the great Chrono Trigger, which is arguably one of the, if not my biggest crying joy in my personal SNES collection. On average, the game is going for, this time last year was going for about $198. So yeah, $198. It's kind of crazy. This year right now, it is hovering around $182. So it's all about a $10 drop from a year prior. But still, it's definitely very expensive, and I don't really recommend collecting the game. Now, I looked out a few years back, I was able to get a copy for about $40 at the time. And I looked out, big time. Luckily, I got it before, well, before a certain pandemic happened 2 years prior. But with that said, I do think it's going to stay relatively steady or possibly go back up just because this is one of those high-end like games that a lot of collectors want. Also, if you're curious, a new copy will set you back about $2,600. Last but not least, of course, is Earthbound. Arguably the Super Nintendo game that is, for some reason, really sought after. Personally, I've played some of it, aka Mother 2, and I have it digital, though, because I got it, I think it was like $7.99, I think I paid for it digitally on the 3DS virtual eShop. But with that said, it's definitely not worth what it's going for. And this is arguably one of the few games that has a real problem with a lot of fakes running out there. But on average, last year at this time it was going for about $357. This year, right now, it's going for about $345. It saw basically just a $12 drop, but don't buy it. Just don't. If you want to play the game, get digitally for about $8. That is a fine and worthy price, but it's not worth anything like $350. Definitely not, in my opinion. It's a good game, but it's not to the level that the prices are going for. Is just absurd, in my opinion. On average, if you're curious about a new copy, you'll be paying out over $7,000. Over $7,000, which is absurd, in my opinion. But with that said, I'll see y'all next time. Same YouTube time, same YouTube channel. Stay safe out there. Hopefully enjoy the Mega Man X music. See you again soon enough for a future one of these price charting videos.